Hi, my name's Vince Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about Memory, a very short introduction written by Jonathan K. Foster. I'm a great fan of these books. I think they're really useful ways into new subjects and good, I guess, entry level texts. Now, this is written by Jonathan K. Foster, who, at the time of writing, this is 2008, I think this was published. He was a clinical professor affiliated with Curtin University in the University of Western Australia and the Telethon Institute. And he works part-time in a neurosciences unit, health department of WA and in private practice. And he's written many books and peer-reviewed publications on memory. So memory's such I suppose a difficult subject to grasp in many respects, because we're so we can't really. It's difficult to separate memory from our own consciousness and look at it objectively, I guess. But nevertheless, there's some fascinating learning in this book. Foster begins with discussing memory as an activity, something we do as humans, rather than a black and white on-off thing. It seems to be more complex than we might initially give it credit for. And he then talks about, the beginnings of study into memory, going from ancient Greek times, what they thought about memory, the likes of Plato, but then with the first real understanding of memory in a more scientific sense in the late 19th century, with this guy called Hermann Ebbinghaus, who spent an inordinate amount of time memorising lists of nonsense syllables and testing how long it took for him to forget those, and then repeating the process. And then in the early 20th century, there's this guy called Frederick Bartlett who thought that actually we're better at remembering things in a context, and it's a kind of a reaction against the Ebbinghaus way, and he realised that we remember better through stories. And there's a story given about these native Indians, which is used to test people's memory about how they understood the story, and then the people would retell the story to someone else to see how memory is influenced by context. And then in the second chapter, Foster talks about different models to describe memory. Very much like a computer, we kind of encode information we see, and we somehow process that information, and then we store it away somewhere, perhaps like a hard drive. And various models with similarities, a bit like that kind of computer analogy, are used describe how memory works, and how failures in memory might be a failing in recalling perhaps that information we've stored effectively. Chapter 3 is more focuses on retrieval of information in more detail, and the relationship between encoding information and our recall or recognition of that. How does that really work between what we experience and store away, and how that can be retrieved successfully. Chapter 4 is about when memory fails us. We quite often have that experience, don't you, when something's on the tip of our tongue, we can't just quite get there. And Foster investigates the different ways in which our memory lets us down sometimes. And also explores ideas such as déjà vu, that odd sense when we feel that we've experienced something before but we can't quite place it. Some interesting topics are brought up in this chapter. Chapter 5 is more about memory loss through brain damage, and when, if you like, the hardware rather than the software goes wrong. Quite alarmingly, there's a picture of the brain in a healthy person and someone with Alzheimer's, and it really brings home how just through the deterioration of the brain tissue can just cause so much loss in memory. So that's a really interesting and thought-provoking chapter. Chapter 6 is all about memory and aging. What happens when we age, how is our memory affected, why do we have trouble recalling perhaps more short-term things as we get older, but still being able to remember things from our childhood. How is that a thing? Why does that happen? And finally, the last chapter is about ways which have been put forward to improve our memory, techniques, mnemonics, to help us, recall information, study techniques for exams, all that stuff which can help us in daily life and help build our memory. And Foster leaves us with some helpful tips, perhaps chief amongst them being to make something your own when you want to memorise something, and make sure there's a context in it and that you're interested in that particular subject. He talks of this person who had a perfect memory but was actually quite miserable because he couldn't declutter his brain, and all this kind of useless information was just stored in his brain, and it kind of affected the quality of his life. So Foster's suggesting, forgetting actually isn't such a bad thing after all, in many instances. So yeah, memory, it's a really interesting book about a fascinating subject, well written, very engaging, and yes, I do recommend this very short introduction. I've just included a brief slideshow as well of some of the themes which crop up in this book, as well as the basic structure of this book. Thanks for watching. Bye.